"Get out! People like you don't belong here." The words sliced through the noise of the Maple Diner like a blade. A young black woman, 6 months pregnant, sits frozen in the corner booth. She wears a soft lavender dress, its gentle color glowing beneath the harsh neon light. One hand rests protectively on her belly, the other trembling against the table's edge. The waitress towers over her, face tight with bitterness. A glass of water crashes down, ice scattering across the table, soaking through the woman's lavender fabric. She gasps, confusion and shame flickering across her eyes. "You heard me," the waitress hisses. "Find somewhere else to sit." Then, the slap. A sharp, echoing crack that freezes the entire diner. Forks stop midair. Conversations die. In the corner, an old Army veteran looks up. His weathered face stills. Beneath the table, his German shepherd growls. Low, protective, ready. Because sometimes, when the world looks away, God sends someone who won't. If you believe faith can still move people to stand for what's right, subscribe to this channel, share this story, and help keep the light of compassion alive. The noon light in early autumn fell softly across the outskirts of Brookhaven, Georgia. The kind of light that makes everything seem slower, quieter, as if the world itself were holding its breath. On the side of Highway 49, where oak leaves were just beginning to bronze, stood a small roadside restaurant with a flickering neon sign that read Maple Diner. Its paint had long faded to a dusty red, and a wooden bench out front leaned slightly from age. The bell above the door gave a tired chime each time someone entered, though that afternoon it rang only once. Serena Thompson pushed open the door with her shoulder, careful not to let it hit her belly. At 6 months pregnant, she moved with deliberate grace, one hand unconsciously resting on the curve of her stomach, as if to remind the small life inside that the world beyond was gentle, or at least trying to be. Her dark brown hair, loosely tied, shimmered in the filtered light that poured through the window blinds. She wore a soft blue maternity dress under a beige cardigan, simple yet elegant, and small silver earrings that caught the sun like drops of memory. She paused for a moment at the entrance, taking in the familiar scent: coffee, frying bacon, and something sweet, maybe maple syrup, clinging to the air. It was the same smell that used to follow her husband home. He had been a firefighter, brave, tireless, with a laugh that filled the house like sunlight. A year ago, that laughter had gone silent, swallowed by smoke and collapsed beams during a rescue. Today, Serena wasn't here for nostalgia, she was here for quiet. But grief, like smoke, always finds its way in through the cracks. The diner looked almost exactly as she remembered: red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, a jukebox by the window still loaded with songs no one played anymore. Only a handful of customers were inside. A pair of construction workers in reflective vests eating hurriedly at the counter, 2 elderly men near the window locked in a slow-motion chess game, and a woman feeding a baby in the corner booth. The air conditioner hummed, pushing faint traces of the coming rain through the vents. Behind the counter stood Brenda Moore, the head waitress and unofficial gatekeeper of the Maple Diner. She was in her mid-40s, tall and broad-shouldered, her once blonde hair grown dull with streaks of gray. Her uniform, a pale blue dress with a name tag that had lost half its paint, strained against her form. A cigarette smell clung to her even though smoking had been banned for years. Her eyes, a washed-out green, moved constantly. Clock, register, window, door, the rhythm of someone who'd done the same job too long. That morning had not been kind to Brenda. The owner had called to say the diner might cut her hours because of low revenue. The tips were poor, her rent was due, and her teenage son had sent a text asking for money she didn't have. By noon, her patience was running, on fumes. When Serena entered, polished, calm, her clothes neat, and her manner quiet, something bitter rose in Brenda's chest. Another one of them, she thought, the kind of woman who never had to scrape or beg. "Seat yourself," Brenda called without looking up, wiping the counter a little too hard. Her voice had that edge of forced politeness sharpened by resentment. Serena smiled faintly, choosing a booth by the window. The leather seat sighed under her weight. She placed her bag beside her and looked outside. A line of clouds was gathering beyond the trees, white at the edges, dark in the middle. The weather forecast had mentioned a passing storm, but she wasn't worried. Georgia storms came and went like tempers. She glanced around. The chess players argued softly over a move. The construction workers joked between bites of pie. Everything was ordinary, safe even. She exhaled and touched the small silver pendant on her neck, engraved with her husband's initials. "It's just lunch," she told herself. Just a quiet lunch. Brenda approached with a menu, setting it down with a dull thud. "Kitchen's backed up," she muttered. "Might be a while." "That's all right," Serena said gently. "I'm not in a hurry." Brenda raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She lingered just long enough to notice the wedding ring on Serena's hand, gleaming under the overhead light. Something about it annoyed her, maybe because hers had been pawned years ago after the divorce. "Water?" she asked flatly. "Yes, please, and maybe some soup. Chicken, if you have it." Brenda nodded stiffly and walked away, her shoes squeaking faintly on the tiles. Serena watched her go, then pulled out her phone. On the screen were draft documents from the legal aid office where she worked. Even on leave, she couldn't resist reading. She had built her career helping people who didn't have voices. Factory workers, evicted tenants, single mothers. The kinds of clients most lawyers overlooked. But since her husband's death, Serena had been different. She no longer saw cases as files. She saw faces, hands, stories that could end badly if someone didn't care enough to fight. She had promised herself she'd return to work after the baby, maybe part-time. For now, she just wanted to learn how to breathe again. The bell above the door chimed. A man entered, tall, broad, with the unmistakable posture of a soldier. His beard was neatly trimmed, streaked with gray. His denim jacket carried a small patch of the U.S. Army, faded by years and sun. Beside him walked a German shepherd, his coat sable brown and black, his gait confident yet calm. They took a seat in the far corner. Serena noticed them briefly but turned back to her window. Through the glass she could see the wind picking up, leaves skittering across the asphalt. The first drops of rain tapped against the pane. Inside, the smell of coffee grew stronger. When Brenda returned, she set the glass of water down carelessly. "Soup's coming," she said. Her tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't kind either, just tired. Serena smiled anyway. "Thank you." For a moment their eyes met, one pair guarded, the other gentle. Then Brenda turned away. Across the diner, the veteran reached down and stroked his dog's head. The animal leaned into his hand, eyes half closed. It was a peaceful scene, one that would soon shatter. As minutes passed, the diner grew quieter. The rain outside deepened, drumming against the roof. The woman with the baby left, wrapping her child in a blanket. The chess game ended in silence. A faint thunder rolled from afar. Serena checked her phone again, a message from her sister. "How are you holding up today?" She typed back, "Better. Just having lunch somewhere quiet." She didn't mention the loneliness pressing behind her ribs like a bruise. At the counter, Brenda stared out the window. The rain always made her feel trapped. She thought about her bills, her ex-husband, the broken washing machine. Every sound in the diner irritated her. The hiss of the coffee maker, the clatter of dishes, the soft hum of conversation. When she glanced toward Serena, sitting there, so composed, something sharp flickered through her mind again. Envy wearing the mask of anger. A car horn honked outside, startling everyone for a second. Serena jumped slightly, her hand moving instinctively to her belly. She smiled nervously and whispered, "It's all right, sweetheart. Just noise." When Brenda brought her soup, she didn't notice her own hand trembling. A few drops spilled onto the saucer. "Sorry," she said quickly, though her tone carried no warmth. "It's fine," Serena replied softly. She tasted the soup, a little salty but comforting. At that moment, the veteran at the corner stood, stretched his shoulders, and glanced briefly at Serena's table before returning to his meal. The dog shifted, ears twitching at the sound of thunder. Outside, lightning flashed. For a second, the Entish diner was washed in white. Then darkness reclaimed it, followed by the low growl of thunder that made the window panes hum. Serena thought of how storms used to terrify her when she was a child, how her mother would light candles and tell her stories until the thunder passed. Now she simply closed her eyes and let the sound fill the emptiness. The clock above the counter ticked toward 1:15 p.m. Brenda refilled the construction workers' coffee and ignored their jokes. She didn't notice Serena watching her with quiet empathy, recognizing exhaustion not as weakness, but as the weight of survival. For a brief, fragile moment, the world inside the Maple Diner was balanced. Rain outside, warmth within, strangers coexisting in weary peace. But balance is a fragile thing. The next hour would shatter it completely. By the time the clock above the counter struck 1:30, the storm outside had turned steady and rhythmic. Raindrops drummed against the window panes, tracing pale rivers across the glass. The Maple Diner glowed in the gray afternoon like a lantern in the rain, warm, quiet, and slightly tense. Serena Thompson lifted her spoon, stirring the remnants of her chicken soup. The warmth of it comforted her, though she noticed the taste had gone a bit bitter as it cooled. Across from her, the seat remained empty, a space she could still imagine her husband filling with jokes about overcooked bacon or the state of diner coffee. She smiled faintly at the thought, then sighed. Behind the counter, Brenda Moore was pacing. She'd just received another text from her landlord. Rent due by Friday. No excuses this time. She shoved the phone into her apron pocket and glared toward the kitchen where the cook, an older man named Ronnie, shuffled about in slow motion. Ronnie had worked there for 20 years and no longer rushed for anyone. His white hair poked out from under a grease-stained cap, and his shoulders slumped like wet cardboard. "Order up?" Brenda snapped. "Working on it," Ronnie replied in his gravelly voice. "You want good food or fast food, Bren?" She muttered something under her breath that Serena couldn't hear. At the far corner, Ethan Ward took a slow sip of his coffee. Rex, his German shepherd, lay at his feet, tail curled, head resting on his paws. Every so often the dog's ears twitched when thunder rolled. Ethan reached down and rubbed the fur behind Rex's ear, an old reflex, soothing both of them. He'd been in firefights quieter than this storm, but the tension he felt wasn't about weather. It was about people, the way voices carried when anger was about to find a target. Serena called softly, "Excuse me?" Brenda turned, her mouth tightening. "Yeah?" "I think you might have forgotten my tea," Serena said gently. "I ordered iced tea earlier, but it never came." Brenda exhaled through her nose. "Kitchen's behind. You want it now?" "If it's not too much trouble," Serena replied, still smiling. Brenda disappeared into the kitchen and returned a minute later, not with iced tea, but with a steaming mug. She set it down with a small clatter. "Here," she said. "Coffee's all we got fresh." Serena blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't drink coffee. Caffeine gives me palpitations. Could I just have water instead?" Brenda's expression didn't change. "You allergic to coffee now?" Serena shook her head, patient. "Just sensitive to it." A smirk flickered at the edge of Brenda's lips, not playful, but sharp. "Always something, huh?" The words weren't loud, but they cut through the low hum of the diner like a blade through paper. Conversations faltered. The two construction workers stopped joking. Even the old men at the chessboard looked up. Serena felt the heat rise to her cheeks. "Excuse me?" Brenda shrugged. "Nothing. I'll get your water." She walked away, but not before muttering, "Always a problem, always a complaint." Ethan glanced up from his booth. His hand paused halfway to his coffee cup. Rex's eyes followed his master's, calm but alert. Serena pressed her lips together, deciding not to respond. She had learned long ago that not every fight deserved her energy. Her mother used to say, "Some people carry storms inside them, baby. You just don't stand where the lightning's going to hit." When Brenda returned, she placed the glass of water down harder than necessary. A few drops splashed onto the table. Serena thanked her anyway. Brenda walked off, her shoulders stiff. Ethan watched her go, the veteran's instinct whispering that something was brewing, not big, not yet, but the kind of small ugliness that grows if left unchecked. He leaned back, eyes on the window, pretending to watch the rain, but listening carefully to every word. Minutes passed. The storm outside softened. Inside, conversation began again, though quieter, more cautious. Serena finished her meal and reached for her purse. She counted the bills carefully, old habit from years of budgeting. Her husband's pension helped, but she still lived modestly. She placed a $10 bill on the table and waited for the check. Brenda returned, holding the receipt. "10 even," she said flatly. Serena smiled, reaching to hand over the bill. "Perfect. Thank you." But when she extended her hand, Brenda snatched the bill too quickly. The edge of the paper tore slightly. Her nails brushed Serena's fingers, rough, impatient. She looked at the torn bill and muttered under her breath, "You people always argue about paying. Typical." Serena froze. The phrase was quiet, but not quiet enough. The diner went still again. A fork clinked against a plate and then stopped. "I'm sorry," Serena said softly, her voice steady. "What did you mean by that?" Brenda looked up, feigning confusion. "By what?" "That comment." "Oh, don't get all sensitive on me. I didn't mean anything." But the way she said anything carried every meaning in the world. Serena inhaled, slow and deliberate. She could feel her baby move, a flutter under her ribs, like a reminder to keep calm. "I just wanted lunch," she said quietly. "Well," Brenda replied, picking up the empty plate. "You got it. Now you can go." As she turned, her elbow caught the glass. Water spilled across the table and down Serena's lap. The sound was small, just the crash of ice cubes against glass, but it landed like thunder. Serena gasped softly, pushing back her chair. The cold seeped through her dress, chilling her skin. Brenda didn't apologize. She just grabbed a towel from the counter and tossed it onto the table. There, accidents happen. Ethan was already halfway to his feet. His chair scraped against the tile, loud in the silence. Rex stood too, posture alert, ears pricked forward. The young couple sitting at the next booth exchanged a look. The woman whispered, "Should we say something?" The man shook his head. "Don't get involved." But Ethan did. He walked up, boots heavy on the floor. "Ma'am," he said, voice calm but unmistakably firm, "I think you owe her an apology." Brenda turned. "Excuse me?" "You spilled water on a pregnant woman," he continued. "It costs nothing to say you're sorry." "She's fine," Brenda snapped. "It was an accident. Why don't you mind your own business, soldier boy?" Ethan's eyes narrowed, but his tone stayed level. "My business is decency." Rex let out a low, controlled growl, not threatening, just warning. Serena rose slowly, clutching the towel, her voice trembling but polite. "It's all right. Please, let's not make this worse." Ethan didn't move. His presence was steady, immovable. Brenda crossed her arms. "You don't scare me," she said. "I'm not trying to," Ethan replied. "I'm asking you to do the right thing." For a long second no one spoke. Rain drummed softly outside. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Then a man from the back, one of the old chess players, stood up, his voice shaky but clear. "Miss, maybe you should apologize. It's the decent thing." Brenda spun on him. "You stay out of this, Frank." But Frank didn't sit down. He simply said, "The world's watching, you know. We all got phones." Across the room, the young woman quietly raised hers, recording. Brenda froze, realizing suddenly how many eyes were on her. Serena's voice came again, soft but unbreakable. "Please, I just want to leave." Brenda hesitated, then snatched the wet bill off the table, muttering, "Fine, go." Serena turned, her steps slow. Water dripped from her hem as she walked toward the door. Ethan followed her gaze, his jaw set. Rex growled again, low, protective. Outside, thunder cracked once more, closer this time. And somewhere deep inside that diner, something darker than the storm had begun to gather, small wounds opening into something larger. The bell above the door clanged softly as another gust of wind rattled the diner windows. The storm outside was in full voice now, rain slicing sideways, thunder rumbling like artillery in the distance. Inside, the Maple Diner felt smaller, the air thick with silence and embarrassment. Serena stood by the table, her blue dress darkened by water, her hand cradling her belly. The towel Brenda had tossed her lay crumpled on the floor. Ethan Ward rose slowly from his booth. He wasn't a man who sought confrontation, but he'd spent too many years in places where silence was dangerous. In war, silence could get someone killed. In peace, it could get someone broken. Rex stood too, ears alert, muscles tense under his sable coat. The dog's amber eyes locked on Brenda with the focused calm of a trained canine, not aggressive but ready. The leash hung loose in Ethan's hand, yet the invisible bond between them held tighter than steel. "Sir, please," Serena said softly, voice trembling. "You don't have to." Ethan turned slightly toward her. "Ma'am, I know," he said. "But some things you just don't walk away from." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to dim beneath it. Brenda straightened behind the counter, arms crossed. "I already told her it was an accident. I don't need some stranger telling me how to do my job." Ethan's gray eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. "Then maybe you should start doing it with some respect." Ronnie, the cook, peeked out from the kitchen window, wiping his hands on a towel. "Hey now, let's not make a scene," he muttered, but no one listened. The young couple in the corner kept recording, their phone light blinking faintly in the reflection of the window. The old man, Frank, stayed standing, jaw set in quiet defiance. Brenda slammed a hand on the counter. "You think you can walk in here with your dog and play hero? You don't know anything about me." "No," Ethan said, voice low. "But I know bullies. You sound just like them." A few of the customers shifted, uncomfortable. The woman who'd been sitting near the door gathered her purse and left, whispering to herself, "This ain't worth it." Serena's hands trembled as she wiped at the water on her dress. She felt her baby move again, a flutter, then a stronger kick. Her heart raced. She wanted to leave, to disappear into the rain, but her feet wouldn't move. Part of her wanted to believe Ethan could make it stop, that decency could still win in a small diner on a gray afternoon. Brenda's face flushed. "You don't get to talk to me like that." Ethan's voice remained calm, but his presence filled the room. "Ma'am, I don't mean to talk down to you, but right now you're talking to a pregnant woman like she's less than you, and I've buried enough good people to know where hate like that leads." That line, quiet, steady, undeniable, hit the room like a hammer. Rex took one step forward, tail low, but body protective. The sound of thunder cracked again, closer this time, as if the sky itself agreed. Brenda's hand trembled on the counter. "You don't scare me, soldier." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Good, then you can listen." Behind him, the young man filming whispered, "It's all on camera, babe. Just keep it steady." Brenda noticed the phone then, the red recording light blinking like judgment. Her anger twisted into panic. "You can't record me. That's illegal." "It's not," Ethan replied calmly. "It's called accountability." Serena finally spoke, her voice breaking through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. "Please, I just want to pay and go home." "You already paid," Ethan said, eyes still on Brenda. "She's the one who made a mess of it." "Shut up!" Brenda snapped, voice cracking. "Both of you, just shut up," Rex growled, a deep vibration from his chest that silenced the room. The kind of sound that says, "Don't take another step." Ethan placed a hand gently on the dog's neck. "Easy, partner." Then to Brenda, "You see that? Even he knows when someone's crossing a line." For a heartbeat, Brenda looked ready to throw something. Then her gaze darted again to the phone, and the reality of a world watching her in real time seemed to dawn. Her face went pale. Ronnie stepped out from the kitchen, spatula still in hand. "Brenda," he said softly, "go cool off in the back. I'll handle it." "No," she hissed. She started it." Serena blinked. "Me? You people always come in here acting like—" Brenda stopped herself, but too late. Every person in the diner heard the words that almost escaped. Frank shook his head slowly. "Careful, Brenda. You're showing too much of yourself." Ethan exhaled. "I think that's enough," he said quietly. "You can either apologize or you can explain it to the police." Brenda froze. "Police?" "You spilled water on her, insulted her, and tried to throw her out. That's harassment. And lucky for you, I'm not the one pressing charges. She is." "I never said I would," Serena murmured, eyes wide. "You don't have to," Ethan said, his tone softening. "But you deserve to be treated better." Rex stepped closer to Serena now, tail wagging gently. The dog seemed to sense her fear, nudging her hand with his nose. She smiled weakly and whispered, "Hey, buddy." The gesture broke something in the room, not the tension, but the distance. For the first time, the other customers saw Serena not as a stranger, but as a woman standing alone, drenched and shaking, holding herself together for the life inside her. Brenda turned away, muttering, "You people always play the victim." That was the final crack. Ethan took one step forward. His voice didn't rise, but every word hit like a drumbeat. "Lady, I've seen real victims. In sandstorms, in burning cities, in families that never got their sons back. Don't you dare use that word to excuse your cruelty." The room fell completely silent. Even the rain seemed to pause against the windows. Brenda's lower lip trembled. For the first time, she looked uncertain, not sorry, but small. Then, from the corner, the young woman filming whispered, "He's right." Someone else nodded. "Yeah." Ethan glanced around, realizing the moment had shifted. The silence wasn't cowardice anymore. It was awakening. Brenda saw it too. She looked around at the faces, strangers, witnesses, no longer indifferent. The power she thought she held had evaporated. Serena reached for her purse again. "Please," she said quietly, "I just want to leave." Brenda didn't move. Ethan placed a 20 on the counter. "That covers her lunch, and her dignity." Then he looked to Serena. "Come on, ma'am, I'll walk you out." As they moved toward the door, the bell jingled again. Outside, the rain had eased, but the air was still heavy with thunder's promise. Rex walked between them, tail brushing Serena's leg, a silent escort of loyalty. When they stepped onto the sidewalk, the wind carried the faint smell of wet earth and oil from the passing cars. Serena tilted her face upward, letting the rain wash away the sting of humiliation. Ethan stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes scanning the parking lot, soldier's habit. "You all right?" She nodded slowly. "I think so." "Thank you." "You don't owe me thanks," he said. "You deserve respect." Inside, through the diner's fogged windows, people still sat frozen, staring at Brenda, who stood motionless behind the counter, the sound of her own heart louder than the rain. Ethan turned toward his truck, Rex trotting beside him. Before he opened the door, he looked back once, the neon Maple Diner sign flickering like a pulse, half light, half shadow. He knew this wasn't over. Some storms don't end when the rain stops. They just move indoors. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle, the kind that hangs in the air like mist. The neon sign of Maple Diner flickered weakly against the gray afternoon, half its letters dim. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee still lingered. Brenda Moore stood motionless behind the counter, staring at the puddle near the table where Serena had sat. The towel lay there, damp and forgotten. Ethan Ward lingered near the door, one hand resting lightly on Rex's collar. He could hear the sound of his own heartbeat, that old combat rhythm that came when adrenaline met restraint. The other customers were murmuring now, voices low and uneasy. Frank, the elderly man who had stood up earlier, finally broke the silence. "Someone ought to call the cops," he said, though his voice wavered with age. The young man who'd been recording nodded. "Already did." He lifted his phone slightly, its red light still blinking. Brenda turned sharply. "You had no right." The young woman beside him answered, calm but firm. "We all have the right to the truth." For a moment, Brenda looked as if she might throw something. Her hands shook, her breathing shallow. But when her eyes darted toward Ethan, she froze, because he was still watching her, not with anger, but with the quiet patience of a man who'd seen too much hate destroy too many people. "You don't have to dig your hole any deeper," Ethan said softly. "Just stop." Brenda's lip curled. "You think you're some kind of hero?" "No," he said. "Heroes are the ones who don't need witnesses." A flicker of lightning flashed through the windows. Outside, sirens began to wail, faint at first, then growing louder. Serena, still standing beside the door, turned to look at him. Her eyes were red but steady. "They really called the police?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "That's how this works now. Cameras first, questions later." Through the glass, the blurred shape of a patrol car appeared, its lights cutting through the drizzle. The door opened, and two officers stepped out, Officer Jim Daniels and Officer Carla Monroe. Daniels was in his late 40s, tall and broad, with a receding hairline and a face weathered by too many double shifts. His uniform clung damply to his shoulders, the badge dull under the gray light. He had the cautious gait of a man who had seen more conflict in quiet towns than he'd ever wanted. Carla Monroe, younger by 15 years, followed behind him. She was slender, composed, her dark hair tied into a tight bun beneath her cap. Her gaze was sharp, not accusatory, just focused, like someone who refused to jump to conclusions until all pieces fit. They entered the diner, the bell chiming weakly above them. "Afternoon," Daniel said, voice calm but authoritative. "We got a call about a disturbance." Brenda immediately pointed at Serena. "She started it!" Serena blinked, stunned. What?" "She was rude, demanding. Then this man threatened me," Brenda said, gesturing toward Ethan. Daniels held up a hand. "Ma'am, let's slow down." His eyes moved to Ethan. "Sir, your name?" "Ethan Ward," he replied evenly. "U.S. Army veteran, retired. I witnessed everything." Daniels nodded once. "All right, Mr. Ward, why don't you tell me what happened?" Before Ethan could answer, the young woman who had filmed it stepped forward. "You don't need to take anyone's word for it. I've got the whole thing recorded." She handed her phone to Carla, who accepted it carefully. "Thank you, miss," the younger officer said. "We'll take a look." Brenda's face went pale. "You can't—" Daniels gave her a long, tired look. "Ma'am, if there's a video, we'll let it speak." As the officers played the clip, the sound of Brenda's own words filled the small space. "You people always argue about paying." Then the splash, Serena's startled gasp, and the silence afterward. Carla's expression didn't change. She simply stopped the video and looked at Brenda. "Ma'am, did you say this?" Brenda's mouth opened, then closed. "It was taken out of context." Daniels sighed. It's hard to take spilled water and racial comments out of context. Serena stood quietly, her hand never leaving her stomach. "I didn't want this to happen," she said softly. "I just wanted to eat and go home." Ethan stepped closer. "She's 6 months pregnant," he said. "Didn't raise her voice once. Didn't even ask for an apology." Rex sat beside him, watching the exchange with that calm, intelligent stillness only service dogs have. The rain dripping from Ethan's jacket formed a small puddle at his boots, but he didn't seem to notice. Daniels looked around the room, the silent witnesses, the turned faces, the weight of what had unfolded. "All right," he said finally. "Here's what's going to happen. Ma'am," he said to Brenda, "we're going to need you to come with us for a statement." Brenda's chin jutted out. "I'm not under arrest." "Not yet," Daniels said, "but we're investigating an incident of public harassment. You can make this easy or make it harder. Your choice." Brenda's hands trembled. She looked around for support, but found none. Ronnie the cook was leaning against the kitchen door, arms crossed. Frank sat back down, shaking his head. Even the young couple avoided her eyes. Carla gestured gently toward the door. "Come on, ma'am." Brenda hesitated, then finally moved, muttering curses under her breath. As she passed Ethan, she stopped and glared at him. "You ruined my life." Ethan met her gaze without anger. "No, ma'am," he said softly. "You did that yourself." Outside, the rain had nearly stopped. The flashing lights reflected in the puddles like scattered fire. The officers guided Brenda into the patrol car. Inside the diner, the atmosphere shifted. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was hollow, like the echo after thunder. Serena sank slowly into a chair. "I can't believe it got that far," she whispered. Ethan pulled a napkin from the counter and handed it to her. "People like her don't just wake up angry. They live there. Sometimes it takes a storm to wash the truth out." She looked up at him, studying his face. There was something steady in his eyes, the kind of steadiness forged in war, but softened by compassion. "You didn't have to help me," she said. He shrugged slightly. "Maybe not, but I couldn't watch another person freeze while someone else got hurt. That's how we lose pieces of ourselves." Rex nudged her hand with his nose again, tail thumping softly. Serena smiled faintly and scratched behind his ear. "You've got a good partner," she said. "He's better than most people," Ethan replied, a hint of humor returning to his tone. They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that isn't joy, but relief. Frank approached their table, hat in hand. "Young lady," he said to Serena, "I just want to say I'm sorry for what happened. Folks like her give the rest of us a bad name." Serena smiled gently. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Ethan nodded at Frank. "Thanks for speaking up earlier." The old man shrugged. "Didn't do much." "You did enough," Ethan said. "Most people don't even do that." Outside, the patrol car pulled away, its red lights fading into the drizzle. The street was quiet again. Inside, the jukebox flickered once, then came to life, playing a song that had been silent for years, "Stand By Me." Someone had forgotten to unplug it after the storm. Ethan turned to Serena. "You need a ride home?" She hesitated, then nodded. "If it's not too much trouble." "Not at all." They walked out together. The veteran, the pregnant woman, and the dog who had once been trained for war but now served something gentler. Behind them, the door closed with a soft jingle. Inside the diner, the smell of rain mixed with the faint echo of the song's refrain. When the night has come and the land is dark, the world, it seemed, was still capable of decency, even if it had to be reminded. The next morning dawned with a quiet brightness that only follows a storm. The air smelled clean, washed of dust and tension. A line of sunlight slipped through the blinds of Maple Diner, glinting on empty coffee cups and chairs turned upside down on tables. The neon sign still flickered weakly, half lit, half ashamed. Tony Moore, the diner's owner and Brenda's older brother, stood behind the counter, arms folded across his chest. He was a large man in his 50s with thinning hair and a gut earned from 20 years of fried breakfasts. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. The call he'd received at midnight still echoed in his mind. "Your waitress was taken in for questioning. There's a video." He sighed, glancing at the small framed photo on the wall. Brenda and him on opening day, 15 years ago, smiling under a fresh sign that read, "Family First. Honest food. Honest people." That sign felt like a lie now. At 8 sharp, a car pulled up outside. Ethan Ward stepped out, the morning light glinting off the worn buckle of his belt. Beside him walked Rex, tail swaying calmly. They looked like two soldiers returning to a battlefield, not out of anger, but duty. Tony looked up as Ethan entered. "You're him," he said quietly. Ethan nodded. "If by him you mean the guy who stopped a waitress from losing her soul completely, then yeah." Tony's jaw clenched. "She's my sister." "I figured," Ethan said. "Same last name." "She's not a bad person," Tony said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Just tired. Life's been rough." Ethan leaned an elbow on the counter. "Life's rough for everyone, Mr. Moore. Doesn't give you the right to make it rougher for someone else." Tony exhaled heavily and nodded. "The video's everywhere now. News outlets called this morning. I've got people online calling the diner racist trash, saying they'll boycott. I don't even know if I should reopen." Ethan looked around. "Then maybe reopen for the right reasons this time." Tony frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means maybe you use this to show people decency still lives here. Clean the place up, hire better staff, treat folks right. Redemption's not about pretending it didn't happen. It's about proving it won't again." Tony studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You sound like a preacher." Ethan gave a faint smile. "No, just a man who's made too many mistakes and learned to own them." At that moment, the bell above the door rang. Serena stepped inside, wearing a pale gray coat that stretched gently over her pregnant belly. Her face looked brighter today, the faintest peace returning to her eyes. "Mr. Ward," she said softly, "I wasn't sure you'd be here." Ethan nodded once. "Didn't plan to be, but I figured unfinished things deserve closure." Tony looked between them awkwardly. "Listen," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I just want to say, I'm sorry for what happened. Brenda's suspended indefinitely. She'll face whatever the investigation decides." Serena met his gaze. "I don't want her punished. I want her to understand." Tony's voice cracked a little. "That might be harder than any sentence." Ethan gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Serena. You look like you've been running on fumes." She smiled faintly and sat. "The news people came by my house this morning. I didn't answer. I'm not ready to be anyone's headline. You don't have to be, Ethan said. The truth already is. Rex lay beside her chair, resting his head on his paws. Serena reached down, scratching gently behind his ears. He's got the kindest eyes, she said. Ethan chuckled softly. Don't let him fool you. He used to chase insurgents through burned-out buildings in Kabul. Now he mostly chases squirrels. Serena laughed, a small, real laugh, the kind that sounded like healing. Tony poured 2 coffees and a glass of water, setting them on the counter. On the house, he said. It's the least I can do. They drank in silence for a while, the only sound the ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the fridge. Then Serena said quietly, I keep thinking about her, Brenda. The look on her face when she realized everyone was watching. It wasn't just anger, it was fear. Ethan nodded. Yeah, people like her aren't born that way. The world builds walls around them. Fear does the rest. Serena sipped her water. Maybe she can change. Maybe, Ethan said, if she wants to. Just then the bell chimed again. A gust of cool air swept in as Officer Carla Monroe entered, her uniform neatly pressed, her expression composed. Morning, she said. Mr. Moore, Mr. Ward, Ms. Thompson. Tony straightened nervously. You've got news? Carla nodded. Brenda's been formally charged with misdemeanor harassment and public disturbance. Nothing that'll put her in jail, but she'll be required to attend a sensitivity training program and complete community service. Tony let out a long breath. Could have been worse. Carla's tone softened. She asked me to give you both a message. Serena looked up. To us? Carla nodded. She said she's sorry. Said she didn't realize how angry she'd become until she saw herself through someone else's camera. Serena's eyes glistened. That's something. Carla smiled faintly. She also said she'd like to meet you, privately when you're ready. Ethan exchanged a look with Serena. Your call, he said quietly. Serena hesitated, then nodded. I'll think about it. Maybe after the baby's born. Carla nodded respectfully. That's fair. She tipped her hat and left, her footsteps echoing softly across the tile. For a while, no one spoke. Then Tony said, You know, maybe this diner needed to fall apart to start over. Ethan smiled. Funny how storms do that. Serena finished her water and stood. I should go. My sister's waiting to take me to the clinic. Ethan stood as well. You need a hand to the car. She shook her head with a smile. I'll be fine, but thank you for everything. He nodded. You don't owe me thanks. Just promise me one thing. What's that? When the world tries to make you small again, don't let it. Serena smiled softly, her eyes shining. I won't. She turned toward the door, rainlight glinting on her wedding ring. Rex stood, following her with his eyes until she was gone. Tony looked at Ethan. You ever think about why you do this? Why you step in? Ethan thought for a moment. Because somebody once did it for me. Tony frowned. In the army? Before that, Ethan said quietly, my dad used to drink. When he'd start shouting, my neighbor, an old mechanic named Harris, would knock on the door just to give me a moment to breathe. He never said a word, never asked for anything, just stood there. Sometimes standing up doesn't mean fighting. It just means showing up. Tony nodded slowly. You're a good man, Ward. Ethan smiled faintly. Nah, just stubborn. He placed a few bills on the counter, more than enough for the coffee. For the repairs, he said, then patted Rex's head. Come on, buddy. As he pushed open the door, sunlight flooded the diner, the kind of light that follows truth. Unforgiving, yet cleansing. Outside, the air was still damp, the pavement shining. Across the street, someone had taped a hand-painted sign to a lamppost, #stand with Serena. Ethan paused, watching it flutter in the breeze. He didn't smile, but there was a quiet peace in his eyes. Inside, Tony looked at the old Family First sign again. For the first time in years, he felt what those words were supposed to mean. Sometimes, the truth hurts not to punish, but to purify. 3 weeks later, the quiet town of Brookhaven was no longer quiet. News vans lined Main Street, their satellite dishes pointed toward the gray sky like metal flowers. Reporters leaned against lampposts, murmuring into microphones about the diner incident that shook Georgia. The once-forgotten Maple Diner had become the center of something larger, a debate about decency, prejudice, and how a simple meal could reveal the fractures beneath ordinary life. Inside the small courthouse 2 blocks away, the air buzzed with anticipation. Folding chairs filled the back rows. Journalists setting up cameras while locals whispered among themselves. A poster outside read, "Municipal Hearing, Brenda Moore versus the State of Georgia." Serena Thompson sat in the second row, hands folded neatly over her lap. Her belly had grown heavier now, her movements slower, but her eyes clearer. She wore a modest navy dress, her hair pulled back, the silver pendant with her husband's initials resting gently over her heart. The memory of that afternoon in the diner still lived in her body, in the way her shoulders tensed when someone raised their voice, in the way she scanned every face for judgment. But today, she came not as a victim, but as a witness. Ethan Ward sat beside her, dressed in a clean flannel shirt and faded jeans. His posture was calm, his expression unreadable, but his hand rested on Rex's head, grounding himself in the steady warmth of loyalty. The German shepherd lay quietly at his feet, harness polished, eyes bright. At the front of the courtroom, Judge Eleanor Whitmore adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. She was in her early 60s, with a crown of silver hair and a voice that carried the calm authority of someone who'd seen every kind of human foolishness. "We are here," she began, "not to destroy a person, but to examine a moment and what it says about us." Brenda Moore sat at the defendant's table, pale and drawn. The defiance she'd shown that day at the diner was gone, replaced by something like remorse, or exhaustion that looked like it. Her lawyer, a thin man in a wrinkled suit named Mark Ellison, whispered something to her. She nodded, but kept her eyes down. The prosecutor, Janet Cole, a middle-aged black woman with calm, steady eyes, stood and approached the bench. "Your Honor, this case is not about fame or viral videos. It's about a simple truth. Words and actions matter. When a public employee humiliates a customer, a pregnant woman, because of her race, that is not just poor service. That is harm." Brenda's lawyer rose. "Objection. The defense acknowledges Ms. Moore's behavior was inappropriate, but we maintain it was not racially motivated. It was a bad day, not a hate crime." Judge Whitmore sighed. "Objection noted. Continue." The prosecutor gestured toward Serena. "Mrs. Thompson, please take the stand." Serena rose slowly. The courtroom seemed to hush as she made her way to the witness seat. Ethan's gaze followed her, silent encouragement in his eyes. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "That day, I didn't expect anything special. I just wanted to eat lunch somewhere quiet. But it turned into something else, something ugly." She paused. "What hurt me most wasn't the words. It was how everyone went silent, like cruelty was normal, until he stood up." She glanced at Ethan, then back to the prosecutor. "That changed everything." Janet Cole smiled gently. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson." The defense lawyer stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Thompson, would you say you might have misinterpreted my client's words? Stress can affect perception." Serena's gaze sharpened. "I didn't mishear you people. You don't forget words like that." A ripple passed through the crowd. The lawyer quickly sat down. Next, Ethan was called to the stand. He walked with quiet confidence, the faint limp from an old injury visible only when he turned. The clerk swore him in. "Mr. Ward," the prosecutor began, "you're a retired Army veteran." "Yes, ma'am, 15 years of service, K-9 unit." "And what made you intervene that day?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Because I've seen what silence does. In war, it kills. Out here, it rots souls. I couldn't sit there and let it happen." The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. "Would you say Ms. Moore posed a threat?" "Not physically," Ethan said, "but cruelty doesn't need fists to leave scars." Judge Whitmore leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable, but her eyes softening. The defense attorney stood. "Mr. Ward, isn't it true you raised your voice at my client?" Ethan shook his head. "No, sir. I raised my conscience." A quiet murmur swept the courtroom again. Admiration, not applause. After both testimonies, the judge called for a short recess. Serena returned to her seat beside Ethan, her hands trembling slightly. "You did good," Ethan said softly. "So did you," she replied. "It's strange. The storm feels smaller now." He smiled faintly. "That's what truth does. It clears the air." When court resumed, Brenda was given a chance to speak. She stood slowly, gripping the table edge. "Your Honor," she began, her voice breaking, "I was angry about a lot of things. My job, my bills, my life. But that woman didn't deserve any of it. I thought I was better than the world that hurt me. Turns out I was just part of it." Tears streaked her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, truly." Serena nodded, not with triumph, but quiet grace. "I forgive you," she said simply. The judge folded her hands. "That's rare these days," she said softly. "Forgiveness doesn't erase the wrong, but it makes space for healing." She pronounced her verdict. Brenda Moore is found guilty of misdemeanor harassment and public discrimination. Sentence: 100 hours of community service, attendance in racial sensitivity training, and a 1-year suspension from public employment. No cheers followed, only a heavy, thoughtful silence. Outside, as people spilled into the street, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, microphones rose like weapons of curiosity. Serena and Ethan walked side by side through the crowd, Rex padding calmly between them. "Mrs. Thompson," one reporter shouted, "do you think justice was served?" Serena stopped. For a moment the world held its breath. Then she said, "Justice isn't about punishment. It's about change, and that starts with how we treat each other when no one's filming." The words spread through the air like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Ethan smiled to himself, guiding her gently toward his truck. "You've got a way with words," he said. "I learned from the best," she replied, glancing down at Rex, who wagged his tail. The rain had returned, soft, forgiving. It pattered lightly on Ethan's jacket as he opened the passenger door for her. Serena placed a hand on her belly and whispered, "He's kicking again. Every time it rains, he moves." "Maybe he likes storms," Ethan said, "or maybe he just knows they pass." As they drove away, the courthouse lights faded in the rearview mirror. The world outside shimmered with the scent of wet earth and renewal. And somewhere deep in that quiet town, for the first time in years, people started holding doors open for strangers again. Winter melted slowly that year in Brookhaven. The air softened first, sharp edges fading into gentle coolness. And then, one morning, sunlight spilled across Main Street like forgiveness. The storm that had once drowned the town in division had passed, leaving behind something quieter: reflection. A year had gone by since the day at Maple Diner. The place no longer existed by that name. The old sign was gone, replaced with one painted by local volunteers. Unity Cafe, simple letters on wood, hand-carved, uneven, but full of heart. Inside, the once drab walls now glowed with new paint and framed photographs of local families. A small chalkboard near the counter read, "Pay it forward. Leave a meal for someone in need." The smell of fresh bread replaced the bitter scent of overbrewed coffee. The hum of conversation filled the space, easy and kind. At a corner table near the window sat Serena Thompson, holding her baby girl. The child, barely 5 months old, had wide brown eyes and a laugh that rang like tiny bells. She wore a yellow knit cap, slightly crooked. Serena kissed the top of her head and whispered, "You're my sunshine, Hope." The name fit her perfectly. Hope Thompson. Serena looked older now, but stronger. The kind of strength born from surviving something that could have broken her. Her hair was shorter, easier to manage, her movements more deliberate. She had returned to work part-time at the legal aid office, focusing on cases about workplace discrimination. Every story she heard reminded her that healing and justice were twins, fragile but powerful together. The bell above the door jingled. Ethan Ward stepped in, a familiar silhouette against the morning light. He wore his tan Carhartt jacket and faded jeans, boots dusted with red Georgia clay. His beard was fuller now, streaked with silver, and though the limp in his right leg remained, his stride carried calm purpose. Beside him padded Rex, older, grayer around the muzzle, but still proud, still alert, tail wagging when he spotted Serena. "Morning," Ethan said with a smile that reached his eyes. "I hope I'm not late." "Not at all," Serena said warmly. Hope just finished her bottle. Perfect timing. Rex trotted over to sniff the baby's tiny hand. Hope squealed in delight and grabbed a tuft of his fur. The shepherd blinked, patient as always. "She remembers him," Serena said. "Smart kid," Ethan chuckled. "Good taste in friends." They sat across from each other, sunlight pooling between their coffee cups. Outside, the street bustled, people heading to work, students laughing, a delivery truck honking gently as it passed. Life, ordinary and unremarkable, had returned. Tony Moore, the cafe's owner, approached their table. He looked healthier these days, slimmer, cleaner shaven, his old bitterness replaced by humility. "Coffee's on me," he said, setting down 2 steaming mugs, "and a biscuit for the little one when she's ready for it." "Thank you, Tony," Serena said softly. "The place looks wonderful." He nodded. "We've had help. Community pitched in, Brenda too, once she got back on her feet." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "How's she doing?" Tony sighed, but it was a peaceful sound. Finishing her volunteer hours at the community center, she started teaching basic cooking classes for single moms. Says she wants to make something good out of all the wrong she did. Serena smiled gently. "That's beautiful." Tony shrugged. "She asked me to tell you both she's grateful, not for the punishment, but for the chance to start over. She still won't come here yet. Says it'd feel strange, but maybe one day." Ethan nodded. Some roads take longer to walk. After Tony left, Serena turned to Ethan. "I didn't expect forgiveness to feel so quiet." "That's how you know it's real," he said. They sat in silence for a while, watching Hope play with Rex's paw. The baby giggled, and for a fleeting second the entire world felt right. No storms, no headlines, just peace. Serena broke the silence. "You still volunteering at the shelter?" "Yeah," Ethan said, leaning back. "Rex and I go twice a week. We train rescue dogs to work with veterans dealing with PTSD. It's good work. Keeps us both steady." She smiled. "You were meant for that." He shrugged modestly. "Maybe, or maybe it's just the only thing that makes sense anymore. giving second chances. Serena looked at him thoughtfully. You ever think of settling down again? Ethan chuckled. With who? The army didn't exactly teach me how to date. She laughed softly. Maybe not, but it taught you how to stand up for what's right. That's a start. Their eyes met. Not romantic, not yet, but understanding. The kind that only people who've walked through fire can share. The door opened again, and a burst of laughter entered with the morning breeze. A group of high school students came in, chattering about homework and prom. One of them, a tall boy with freckles, pointed at a framed newspaper clipping on the wall. It read, Army Veteran and Pregnant Woman Inspire Change in Brookhaven. Below it hung a smaller plaque, dedicated to those who stood up when silence was easier. Serena's eyes softened. They hung it up last month, Tony had told her once, not to brag, to remember. Ethan followed her gaze. You ever think about that day? Every time I hear thunder, she said quietly, but it doesn't scare me anymore. He nodded slowly. Storms don't last. People do. Hope babbled softly, waving her tiny arms as if to agree. Serena kissed her forehead and whispered, She's going to grow up in a better town than we did. Ethan smiled. Because her mom made it better. Serena's eyes shimmered with quiet pride. No, because people like you reminded us what courage looks like. Outside, the sky was an endless blue, the kind that feels earned after months of gray. Rex rose, stretching, and padded toward the window. Sunlight warmed his fur. He watched a flock of sparrows dart between telephone wires, barking softly, not at them, but with them, as if sharing their freedom, then finished his coffee and stood. You two need a ride home? Serena shook her head. We'll walk. It's a good day for it. He nodded. Then I'll walk you anyway, just in case the weather changes. They left together, Serena pushing the stroller, Ethan walking beside her, Rex trotting ahead, tail high. The town moved around them, a mail carrier whistling, a shop owner sweeping her porch, a boy on a bike calling to his friends. It was all so ordinary and yet extraordinary in its calm. As they passed the courthouse steps, a gentle wind lifted the corner of a poster still taped to the lamppost. Hesher stand with Serena. The paper had faded, but the words remained. Serena smiled. I guess it stayed longer than the storm. Ethan looked up at the clear sky. That's how hope works. They reached the park at the end of the street. Children were playing under budding trees, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. Serena stopped, watching them. You know, she said softly, when I first walked into that diner, I thought I'd lost everything good in the world. Now I see I was just standing in the dark, waiting for morning. Ethan looked at her, then at Hope, cooing in the stroller. Morning came, he said simply. For a long moment they stood there, two survivors of different wars, united by something larger than either of them. Grace. Behind them, Unity Cafe's windows glowed golden in the sun. Inside, strangers shared tables, laughter replaced silence, and the scent of baking bread drifted through the open door, a quiet hymn to second chances. The town of Brookhaven breathed easier that day, not because justice had been served, but because compassion had taken root. And as Ethan and Serena walked down the street, Rex padding faithfully beside them, Hope reaching toward the light, it was clear that some storms don't destroy. They cleanse. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or shining lights. Sometimes they come quietly, through a stranger who chooses kindness over silence, a hand that lifts instead of condemns, a voice that speaks when others turn away. What happened at that little diner wasn't just a story about prejudice and pain. It was about redemption, the kind that only grace can bring, because when we forgive, when we stand up for what's right, we don't just change one moment, we change the world around us. Maybe that's the miracle God sends us every day, the chance to love again, to see good in others, to be the answer to someone's prayer, even without knowing it. So tonight, before you close your eyes, pray for those still fighting silent battles. The tired mother, the lonely veteran, the broken heart learning to trust again. Ask God to bless them and to use you as His hands in this world. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Maybe it will remind someone else that faith still works miracles, one act of compassion at a time. Leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and let's keep spreading stories of light, mercy, and hope until the world remembers what kindness feels like again. May God bless you and everyone you love, and may your next morning be brighter than the one before.